Hi, I'm Paeter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues, a retrospective series where I talk about memorable DC comics of the past that are still affordably available today, blabbing, about why they are special to me, and what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, this series does freely contain spoilers, but I think even spoiled, the stories I feature are still well worth reading. This time we're taking a look at the one-shot comic event DC Universe Rebirth #1, but before doing that, I'll share a few brief thoughts about a storyline that came right before it called The Final Days of Superman. This story was 8 issues long and ran through various books, including Superman, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Action Comics. In this story, the New 52 Superman discovers that he is dying and there is no cure, and so he takes time to visit and say goodbye to those in his life who mean the most to him, while also fighting off a villain and getting an introduction to the pre-Flashpoint Superman, who in this story begins to reveal himself publicly for the first time. For the story of how the pre-Flashpoint Superman arrived with wife Lois and son John into the New 52 DC Universe, I'll refer you to the last installment of this series covering the miniseries titled Superman, Lois and Clark. I find The Final Days of Superman to really be unmemorable as a story on its own, largely because I think many readers, didn't care for the New 52 Superman and mostly saw this story as a necessary plot point in order to get him out of the picture and make room for the Superman I know and actually respect. There are some interesting threads left hanging that The Final Days of Superman acknowledges by the end of it. For example, the pre-Flashpoint Superman technically doesn't know this world's Batman or this world's Wonder Woman or anyone else. They are merely alternate versions of the pre-Flashpoint friends, acquaintances, and loved ones that are now seemingly lost to him forever. Additionally, the New 52 Superman and Wonder Woman had an ongoing love affair, which pre-Flashpoint Superman never had. And there is a brief recognition of the potential awkwardness of that in this story that I do appreciate. So while I don't quite consider The Final Days of Superman to be essential reading, it does establish some problems inherent to trying to partially revive elements of the pre-Flashpoint DC universe. And these kinds of problems, despite my impatience at the time the Rebirth one-shot was released, are not quickly, easily, and respectfully addressed if the goal is a partial and not full restoration of pre-Flashpoint continuity. The Final Days of Superman does also provide a bit of a bridge between Superman, Lois, and Clark and their place in the Rebirth era of DC Comics. So while not essential in my book, The Final Days of Superman is definitely recommended. But now for the main topic. I'm going to do something a little different as I share my thoughts on DC Universe Rebirth #1. As some of you may remember, I was a hardcore weekly comic book buyer for decades, but gradually fell away from the hobby as the New 52 DC Universe kind of settled in and established who these characters were in this new iteration. I ended up taking about 7 years off from regular comic book reading. But in 2016, when the DC Universe Rebirth one-shot hit stands, I went to one of the few comics shops still standing and purchased my copy in hopes of finding that the right changes were being made to draw me back in to what had been for years my most beloved geek hobby. I shared my reactions to the one-shot in one of my early YouTube videos and decided here that we could revisit that, trimming it down and sharing some of those thoughts and reactions right now, after which I'll come back and give my brief updated thoughts on the DC Universe Infinite one-shot after having 6 more years of time and perspective, sharing why I now believe it is essential reading for hardcore DC Comics fans, or at least for this one. So without further delay, here is 38-year-old Paeter's hot-off-the-presses reactions to the DC Universe Infinite one-shot. DC Universe Rebirth. This is the first time I've purchased a new comic off the press in about 4 years. I was a big fan of the DC Universe for a long time. I've still got comic books covering my walls. I've got cases and cases filled with comic books. I'm a big fan of the DC universe, but something went terribly wrong in the what do you call it? The Flashpoint followed by the New 52. That's right. They just got rid of all the older generation of characters that could provide potential wisdom to these young whippersnapper heroes, and now all of the heroes that were veterans or at least established heroes were like rookies, and it was just a really strange change. The New 52 also seemed to be a desire to check a lot of demographic boxes and represent a lot of different minorities and subgroups and stuff like that, and that in and of itself I have no problem with, but it seemed like they were kind of forcing those things into the lives of different characters and into stories and things like that, instead of allowing them to just kind of organically happen, or maybe create new characters and then make them interesting, because of who they actually are. They didn't call it like a reboot at that time, but really so much of the history of the DC universe was lost with the New 52, and I thought I was in the minority in feeling like, oh man, they're really going off the beaten path here, and they're changing in some cases, the core of who these characters are. But it turns out over time that, I'm not the only one that's kind of not enjoyed the direction of the New 52. So DC's response and their attempt to win back some of the fans that have dropped off over the course of the introduction of the New 52 is DC Universe Rebirth. This is a one-shot, 80-page deal that kind of introduces a reconnection of the pre-New 52 content with the now New 52 content universe. And so going forward, they're going to try and merge these two continuities so that everyone can play nicely together, they hope. And this is what's kind of kicking it off. Now, I'm going to start with some non-spoilery thoughts about my read, and then I'll warn you when I'm going to go into spoiler territory a little bit later. The main character of the story is Wally West, who, the Wally West that we know from the pre-New 52 era, was completely wiped from history with the reboot of the New 52. They did bring along an African-American Wally West who eventually, took his place and got Flash powers and stuff like that, but it was not the Caucasian red-haired Wally West that we're very familiar with, who was the sidekick of the original Flash and, all that jazz. That one has been apparently lost in the Speed Force or the time stream. It's still very unclear at this point what happened, but he is now trying to get back in touch with reality. He's been lost in the Speed Force because of this event that happened that changed time forever at during the Flashpoint story. So he's dancing around the DC universe and trying to reconnect with various characters. He's, as old Flash fans would know, Linda Park, his one true love, was always his lightning rod, his attachment to reality. Whenever his Speed Force adventures would take him off into the Speed Force, he would find his way back through his one true love. And so he was trying to find connections through Linda and through other people that he knew that would get him back to reality so that he could warn everybody about this villain who caused this huge disruption in continuity to begin with. That villain is, I'm not going to spoil it, but they're pretty much revealed at the end of the story, though not blatantly. But I think you can kind of see where things are going, and it is an interesting change, and to see oh my gosh, really, they're going to do that, So I'm interested to see kind of where things go, but. And I enjoyed this story. There was even one moment in particular that had been spoiled for me in advance, but when I got to it myself, my eyes were brimming with tears, and I was like, "Wow, that was really well done." This is written by Jeff Johns, and that's one of the main reasons that I decided to give this a read. The other reason is because of the spoilers that I read about at GameSpot. That there was what they're going to be doing, what they're going to be changing and addressing in the continuity. If I hadn't read those spoilers, I wouldn't have even touched this, because I've just felt like for the longest time, DC is just clearly not writing stories that are, or handling the DC universe in a way that's going to appeal to me at all, and that's just fine with me, because I discovered after dropping my comic book habit that suddenly I had this influx of money that it's so much easier to save now, and so the enjoyment time to financial investment ratio was a lot more satisfying, I discovered, as I, just looked at movies and video games and the other things that I'm interested in. So it's going to take a lot for me to start dropping the kind of money that I used to drop to form a comic book habit again. But anyway, I found it satisfying. I'm interested to see where they go. The problem is this is a one-shot. It's not like a 3 or 6 or 12 issue miniseries that's going to tell you who the villain is and what's happening, and this big kind of event. At the end, it just gives you it shows you a bunch of covers to a bunch of number ones, new titles that they're starting, or like that they're going back to number one on. But they're taking Batman, Teen Titans, Superman, Green Lantern. They're taking them all like back to issue number 1 again. But the stories that they're promoting in the covers that they show at the end of this issue, it's like they don't seem to be connected to this story except in very few instances. I'm like, where is the continuation of this story? Where's the continuation of like how they're going to merge the universes, what changes they're going to make, so that I can see if this ship is being righted enough, at least as far as my tastes are concerned, for me to get back into it. And I don't see that happening. I think I'm just going to have to, wait on the sidelines again and just check in with, geek news outlets to see, okay, when are they going to resolve this story? When are they going to reveal who this big villain is? When are whoever the heroes are that are going to team up? When are they going to team up and go fight this villain? And when are we going to finally know, okay, now this is the new status quo. These are the continuity changes. That's really what I care about. That's what I want. I want to know what changes they're going to make. And right now, as interesting as this was, and as much as it piques my curiosity, I'm like, I'm not going to buy any of these other single issues in hopes that they will pick up the threads of this story and take it forward so I can see what they're planning to do. Okay, run away, go, go, go. I'm going to talk spoilers now. So I knew, because of spoilers that I'd read about, that the villain that's revealed at the end is presumably Dr. Manhattan. Which is a really interesting twist. Batman at the end is like trying to follow some instructions given to him by the Flash that would help him uncover what had gone wrong with the timeline, and while he's digging around in his Batcave, he discovers this the bean juice smiley face button, and then they take you over to a shot on Mars, and they've got the little dialogue bubbles that are clearly using the same style as the original Watchmen, and it makes a lot of sense with what they're talking about. They're talking about hope being something that is absent but in the DC universe right now, but something that we need to be valued, that needs to be valued, and the great enemy is apathy here. Well, that was Dr. Manhattan's position in Watchmen, is he was just very apathetic, and so I can see him being the villain. And then when one person is mysteriously destroyed by the villain, they kind of evaporate in the same bluish kind of light that Rorschach was evaporated in toward the end of Watchmen. There's some weird stuff going on here. I mean, I didn't know about this storyline that Batman was sitting in the Mobius chair, I guess, and found out that asked the Joker's real identity, and the answer given to him apparently was there are 3 Jokers. I don't know what the crap they're planning on doing with that. That seems like a really weird choice. That doesn't seem like something that's going to like stabilize and return the Joker to the kind of character that I think he should be, instead of the guy who ripped his own face off and sewed it back on. And oh man, that whole design concept was just way too busy. So this whole 3 Jokers thing, that is not a good sign to me. I mean, I think if there are 3 Jokers, then inevitably either 2 of them or all of them lose power. They no longer are the iconic Joker. When suddenly Jokers is like a team or something like that, I mean, that just seems so stupid to me, rather than it being one freaking crazy, scary, iconic villain. I don't know why they would do that. One thing I really thought was exciting, I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you, was the indication that they're going to be bringing back the World War II-based Justice Society. We've got Johnny Thunder in here, who's running, around an old folks' home or something like that, and he remembers that he used to command this genie, this thunderbolt. Apparently, he's been trying to find the Justice Society that he is familiar with, as opposed to this Earth 2 Justice Society of young rookies or young punks or whatever. He remembers the Justice Society that's like the grizzled, veteran heroes, and those are the ones that I so miss, because they provide a sense not only of legacy, but a sense of wisdom from the older generation. And I think that's something that we really need to not forget. We can get so into our mindset of, well, my way is the right way, old people are out of touch and stuff like that. A lot of old people are out of touch, but a lot of old people have gained a lot of wisdom that we could really benefit from if we would take time to listen. Then there's a reference to, I guess it's apparently Saturn Girl, maybe, one of the members of the Legion of Superheroes from the 30th or 31st century or whatever the crap. Apparently she's come back in time. She's been brought in by the police because she stole a sandwich, because where she's from all food is free or something like that, and she's in the interrogation room. She's like, I'm just here to see Superman, just let me talk to Superman. And they're like, haven't you heard Superman might be dead? So I guess in the latest Superman story he's dead or gone missing in action or something like that. I really don't care. I've been saying for a long time that Superman never cracks a smile. He's always angry and he's got red burning eyes and I mean, if people were complaining about Man of Steel and like how like kind of brooding and somber he was still like a nice guy. He was maybe kind of like tortured and down and not really optimistic, but at least he was still a nice guy most of the time. And like this Superman is like always angry about something. That's the new 52 Superman. If he's dead, that's cause for optimism for me. Then there's a reference to Ray Palmer and the Atom, and that he seems to know that there's some kind of temporal disturbance going on. I don't think the Atom was one of the titles that's mentioned here as like going to be a new monthly, so I don't have any reason to think that we'll get a continuation of this story through an Atom comic book, so that's kind of a shame. Then there's some stuff about Blue Beetle and the original Ted Cord, and then Jaime Reyes, and he's kind of taken on the mantle of the Blue Beetle, and it was an alien scarab that's attached to him that turns him into the Blue Beetle and stuff. And then Dr. Fate shows up, who is not known because he's one of the old Justice Society characters, and he tells Ted Cord, no, you've been fooled, the scarab is not alien, it's magic, so they're doing a little bit of retconning there. Then they briefly touch base with some of the new heroes, like it looks like Damian Wayne, and this new female Green Lantern I don't know anything about, and this black guy who he's gay and maybe has something to do with swimming, so maybe he's Aqualad or something. I don't know what's going on there. Then there's something here about Diana, as in Wonder Woman, having a twin brother that she never knew about, so presumably we'll hear about that. I don't care. I don't see how that's relevant. That I don't know what that has to do with the changes that they're making in the continuity, with the rebirth of the DC universe, with Diana having a twin brother. I don't know how that's relevant. There's lots of little like story beats in here that I'm like, okay, that's interesting, and okay, I see you're planning to do a retcon here, but what does this have to do with the main story of the temporal whatever villain that's trying to destroy heroes or something like that? I mean, what's weird about this whole thing is it seems like this kind of like promo story that's setting up a much grander story that's going to be told, but then they don't really give you an indication of where to go to read the story that you're interested in. I mean, yeah, I guess if you want to know about Wonder Woman's twin brother, then you can probably follow Wonder Woman here, but it just says everything she knows and trusts will be taken from her, Wonder Woman #1. There's just no indications of like... And I'm not interested in risking my money on a monthly basis to slowly, over the course of months, get an understanding of what they're planning here. What I wish they would have done is just like a 3-issue miniseries. That's all you need. 3-issue miniseries to tell this whole continuity reset story, and then just put in front of me at the end of that what the new status quo is, so that I can decide whether or not I'm interested in what you're doing. Instead of this slow, drawn-out thing that's split up into a bunch of different titles, guess what? That's not going to get me to buy more books. That's going to get me to buy no books. There's indication that Green Arrow and Black Canary, that their relationship is probably going to be heading back together. They I guess haven't really had much of a relationship in the New 52, although prior to the New 52, they had been an on-again, off-again Sam Diane item for years and years and years. So it looks like they're going to be respecting that legacy of their relationship a little bit more and bringing that back. Then they've got the Lois and Clark from the New 52 universe that I guess have a son. I'm not sure how old he is, but in the background there he looks like he's at least 5, which I guess would make sense since this New 52 has been around for about 5 years. But then when he finds out that the New 52 Superman may be dead, he says he goes out the door to like go check it out or something, and then boom, he runs into a mysterious figure who says, you can call me Mr. Oz for now, which I'm just betting $1 billion is Ozymandias from the Watchmen universe. And he delivers this cryptic news saying to Clark, you and your family are not what you believe you are, and neither was the fallen Superman. So it looks like they're aiming for some kind of a continuity reset or merging or like a major retcon going on there. I'm not sure what in the world they're planning. But I'm hopeful that we will in some form get this pre-New 52 Superman back, even if they're going to somehow merge him with the New 52 Superman, which actually I think is pretty likely given the costume redesign that we see on this last splash page. If you'll notice, his neckline is the same as the classic Superman, but yet he's got the belt and some of the other kind of costume design type choices of the New 52 reboot. So I think we're probably looking at some kind of scene where they go and they like become one person again or something. Where does that leave his son and Lois? I have no idea. He's probably going to be raising his son because it says in Superman #1, man and son of steel. So, I don't know. That seems like it might be kind of a weird story, but we'll see. Aquaman finally proposes to Mera. I don't really care. I don't have much history or investment in that character. The part that moved me was when Wally West had run out of all options of people that he could connect to, including Linda Park, who had always been his lightning rod in the past. He finally lands on Barry Allen, the New 52 Barry Allen, who like sees him and doesn't know who he is, and so Wally's like, okay, this is it, I'm gonna die, and right before he dies, he's just kind of saying goodbye, even though he's like, Barry's not going to know who I am. This is not going to mean anything to you, but I just want to say thank you for all that you've been to me, for the life that you gave me. It's just been wonderful, and I'm so grateful for all that I had because of you. And then he's starting to just kind of dissolve into the Speed Force, and then at the last moment, there's a moment of recognition in Barry's eyes where he's like, Wally? And then he grabs him, and that name had never been said out loud before, so you realize in that moment, oh my gosh, he really remembers. He grabs his arm and holds him, keeps him back from dissolving, and then in this last page, he's got tears. Barry has tears in his eyes as he realizes who this is, and then there's this great splash page where he said, leading up to it, he said, I'm so sorry, Wally. How could I ever forget you? And this was the moment that, even though it was spoiled for me in advance, just brought tears to my eyes. And it's interesting how this book is being written. It's being written, in some ways, you can hear the Jeff Johns representing fans of the pre-52 DC universe, all throughout this, just in the way that they're talking about the new 52 DC universe and the tone and how something's wrong and some villain caused things to be the way they are, like as a pre-52 fan, I'm like, yeah, it would have to be a villain that totally screwed up the DC universe like this. And then when you see this, it's, it's very cathartic, where Barry's like, how could I ever forget you? And of course, I'm sure there are tons of Wally West Flash fans that are like, yeah, how freaking could you guys just forget Wally West? How in the world could you do that? So that's very satisfying from that standpoint. And then Barry gets a flood of memories. He's like, I remember it all now. So I suppose if there was one title I was going to look into after this, it would be the Flash one, because I'm like, okay, so Flash remembers now what happened. Maybe I can start getting an idea of how they're planning to merge these two continuities if Barry Allen's memories have now been repaired. Although the splash page at the end doesn't give me any indication that that's what the next Flash story is going to be about in the Flash Monthly comic. And that's it. We just get, okay, at the end of this, okay, Barry remembers Wally. That's it. That's all we've got at this point. And then a bunch of splash pages, the greatest heroes, their greatest threats, DC Universe Rebirth. And, you can try to figure out, what their plans are for the DC Universe based on this splash page. It does look like it's going to be a blend of pre-52 and New 52. Maybe in Titans #1 there will be something that indicates what the plan is. I do like this new costume design for Wally West. You see a close up of it here, but then you see the full costume right here, and I really like that design. I think bringing him back, he's not going to be Kid Flash, he's not going to be the Flash, he's going to be something else. They'll figure out what that name is, or maybe they'll just call him Flash. I was content for there to be multiple Flashes in the pre-52 universe, so maybe they will call him Flash. But I do like that costume design of red and silver. But it says Wally West uncovers a secret that will destroy his friends, and I don't know, it makes him look a little bit sinister there. So I'm like, what the crap is that all about? He was just trying to survive in a moment ago, and now he's like going to destroy his friends or something. I don't know. It looks like it's not truly going to be the answer to the questions that I have. So I'm just like, where, DC, I'm interested in what you're doing, but you're not telling me where to go. You're not telling me what I should buy next to find out what you're doing. Are you seriously just expecting me to just kind of hope that my questions will get answered and try out these issues and just stick around and drop my $3 every week until I find out the answers I want? That is so not going to happen. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the DC Universe Rebirth checklist is what they provide at the end here, and they have like one sentence synopses for each of these that's none of which give me hope that they're going to answer the questions that I have, with few exceptions. I mean, Titans Rebirth #1 says Wally West returns to the team hunting a villain that cast him out of time. Okay, so maybe there's some hope there, but man, I think that if they're trying to hook me, and I say that egotistically, I know they're not trying to hook me, Paeter Franson, but they aren't hooking me. I have no idea what to read next, and I'm not interested in risking my money to try and find out what I should read next. So, now, as some of you know, about 2 years ago, I tried out the DC Universe Infinite subscription service and have kept my subscription almost every month since, as I have fallen back in love with the DC Universe. The service, which I believe still costs about $8 a month at its basic tier, I could be wrong, but it gives access to nearly every DC comic in the company's publication history, going all the way back to the Golden Age and up to as recent as 6 months after comic shop releases of physical copies, which is a great deal if you're just willing to be a little bit patient. At this stage in my life, I don't feel the need to collect and keep physical comics like I once did, and so for the price of about what was, 2 to 3 comics 10 years ago, I can now have almost unlimited access to all DC comics of the past and present. This means that searching out and discovering those ongoing threads teased in the Rebirth one-shot, that's no longer a financial risk. On top of that, by taking their time with a slow burn, a gradual reveal as they reset or reestablish continuity and status quo elements, DC can tell much better stories along the way as they do that, with a more respectful focus on character. My biggest complaint of status quo changing crossover events in the past is that they happen so fast, covering such big changes that the stories are usually dominated by forced exposition. But that is not at all what the rebirthing of the DC Universe has looked like to me. And so at this point, leveraging the DC Universe Infinite service, I no longer find the Rebirth one-shot to be a presumptuous move that assumes I have ridiculous amounts of money to burn, as it felt at the time. Instead, it reads like the intriguing beginning of a larger, multifaceted movement, as I think DC intended me to feel about it from the start. And without giving away yet the specific stories I will feature in the future, I can say at this point that the Rebirth era of DC Comics has far more essential issues in my mind than the New 52 ever did. In my personal reading, I am catching up year by year and am currently working on DC Comics published in 2019 as they moved finally away from the Rebirth branding, and I can look back and say that there was a lot I enjoyed in the Rebirth era. And the DC Universe Rebirth one-shot is the essential beginning to all of that. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.